Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Wyss, and this is the latest edition of the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm joined by my associates, the man, the myth, the legend, Jonathan Fadugba. How you doing, John?
Such a nice intro there, Steve. You're going to make me blush. No, I appreciate that. I'm doing very well. Super excited about the new season. I've been waiting for this now for a good few weeks, even months, with the few Norwegian pods we've had in the last few weeks. Raring to go.
Yes, this is going to be a special Swedish Allsvenskan season preview for 2018. Unfortunately, nothing Norwegian on the podcast this week, but yes, the start of the new campaign. I'm sure you're very excited, John, and there's only really one team we can begin the podcast with, and that is the champions Malmö, who have won 3 of the last 4 editions of this championship. Clear favourites with the bookmakers, although you can get nearly 2-1 on them, which would suggest it could be a more open race than expected. How do you think they're going to get on defending their crown?
Well, it's a good place to start with the champions. And yeah, of course, they're going to be clear favourites. I think everyone would like to see a title race. I think it could well be closer this season than in seasons past. So it will be interesting to see how the challengers fare. But we have to start with Malmö, of course. Multiple title winners. They'll go for it again. Yeah, like I say, they're clear favourites. They've lost quite a lot of players in this window though, and a few people are tipping other teams to maybe challenge them. So they're not going to have it all their own way, according to many people.
Yes, I mean, one thing I was going to say is that they scored 63 goals last year in the league, and they've lost quite a lot of the players who scored those goals for them. John, 33 goals in total have been lost from the team. A big few changeovers. I mean, who's going to replace the likes of Joe Inge Berget and Erdal Rakip, who knocked on the score sheet door quite a lot last season? Who is going to fill their boots?
Well, I think in terms of goal scorers, Carlos Strandberg is the one that everyone will look to. He's back now in Sweden. He many people's tips for the top scorer actually. He's a 21-year-old Swedish under-21 international previously, and he's a sort of strong player. I think he will score quite a lot of goals. He's come into the side and we'll kind of look to, replace the goals left by a lot of the departing players. They've had players going off to the MLS, the likes of Wolf and Jotun, who's already gone previously, and Tinnerholm. But yeah, Jeremy F will be up front as well. Marcus Rosenborg, 35, he's still there, the veteran. But Strandberg is the one who everyone will look to kind of reinforce and reinvigorate that forward line.
Yeah, it seems like they might be slightly vulnerable this year, but is there that big fear factor for the rest of the league that, they're the big dog? And is there enough belief from the challengers that they can be toppled?
Well, yeah, I think the key thing is, Magnus Persson, who's the manager who won the title last season. I think one of the key questions for them, Malmö, this season will be, will he rotate and how will they kind of handle the Champions League qualifying? They really want to get to the Champions League group stages if they can. How will he handle that situation? Last season was very, well known for the fact that he was regularly dropping Magnus Wolf, who was one of the best players of the 2016 season, and he was regularly dropped. Now that he's shipped out a lot of those players, Rakip, for example, Tobias Sana's gone, Sibicki's gone to Leeds, will he continue to rotate? The likes of Bonke Innocent's there now, who a lot of the fans have got on his back already and aren't really a big fan of. Kingsley Sarfo's going to prison, a £1.6 million signing, but he looks like his contract's pretty much been terminated after some really serious sexual assault charges. That's a fair amount of money down the drain there. But there's the players like Matthias Svanberg, who's a youngster, a teenager who's going to have a lot of he's highly rated in Sweden and he'll have a lot of attention, I think. Oscar Levitsky's still there. They'll look to have the likes of Traustason, who's been bought on the wing. He's an experienced player. He's won the league with Norrköping, played in Lietuvania before Iceland International. They've also spent 700,000 euros in forward Bashiru. So, there's the possibility that he will rotate. Soren Reeks has come in on a free from IFK Göteborg. So will he rotate Persson again? Will he shift his team around? They've experimented with formations, and it's going to be interesting to see how he does in that sense.
Yeah, there's one transfer that they brought in that caught my eye, and that was Isaac Siwan Cambo, who has come from Molde on loan. And I've got to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure this is a great signing for them. Not because I don't rate the player. I think he's got some decent potential, but he's always injured, or he always was injured at Mulder anyway. And I think it affected his performances on the field. So they need to keep him in a good physical condition. Otherwise, unfortunately, his transfer will live up to his namesake in that regard. So just one final question regarding Malmö before we move on. European football last season was a big failure for the club. How important is it for them that they at least go on some sort of European journey with the qualifiers this summer? And could that potentially affect them negatively in the title race? Because if you're going to make, say, the Champions League group stages, I think you've got to get through about 4 rounds of qualifiers now, John.
Well, I think the one thing to say is I don't think they're going to have it all their own way, Malmö. I don't think they'll get to the summer and be able to kind of rest several players and rotate their squad too much in that sense. I think there'll be closer challenges this year. So I don't think the points gap will allow them to kind of take their eye off the Allsvenskan at any moment this season, to be honest. On the point of C1 Cambo there, actually it's worth pointing out that they've brought Egson Beneku from Häcken on the left back, who's quite highly rated, and also Erik Larsson, who I was really impressed with last season for GIF Sundsvall. So those guys will be the left and the right back, and then obviously they'll have Traustason and probably Reeks on the wings. So they do have a lot of players in that squad that they can rotate and move around to keep fresh for the Champions League. But yeah, it's going to be a massive focus for them. I think if they were to go out like they did last season with a whimper, it would be a big disappointment for their fans. But like I say, I think they're going to have a stronger battle this season to retain the title.
Yes, very interesting thoughts about Malmö there. Just to explain how we're going to go about the format of this particular podcast, we're splitting it into 3 sections: the title, European challenges, mid-table battle, and then the relegation battle as well. So there's 5 teams we're going to talk about in this potential title race. Let's move on to one of the Stockholm clubs, and that is Djurgården, who are into the... I watched them in the Swedish Cup semi-final against AIK. They finally managed to end their curse. So there's a bit of positivity heading surrounding this team going into the new season. Do you see them as a dark horse, potential winner of this title?
Yes, well, as you mentioned there on the format of the podcast, we've also taken the list of journalists' predictions. The Allsvenskan official website has a collected sort of journalists' predictions, and we've looked at those. And in their predictions, Djurgården are kind of top 4, I think. I think they're predicted to be 4th. I actually think, and a lot of people think that Djurgården will be around that area, but I actually think they've got an outside bet for the title, to be honest. And I'm quite up on Djurgården for a couple of reasons. First is I really like their manager. I think Özcan Melker is a good manager. I think he's proved himself at AFCS Skillstuna in getting them promoted. His players regularly talk about liking him. They sometimes have a love-hate relationship with him because he is a bit of a hard taskmaster. He does push players. It can be a bit gruff, chain smoking away behind the scenes and stuff like that. You know what I mean? He's a bit of a gruff character, but he builds a great team spirit and togetherness in his squads. And I think that showed in the fact that, they're the first team, in 20 games, was it 7 years to lift the derby curse, beating AIK. The first time they've beaten a team from their own city in Stockholm for 20 matches. And I think the backstory of that is quite interesting because the fans groups, there's a lot of supporters groups at Djurgården who when they were losing games last season, for example, it was a massive criticism. It really ruined their season, the fact that they couldn't win any derby. And a lot of fans groups kind of thing had words and turned up at the training ground angry after one of the games. And Özcan basically said to them, look, you actually, everyone was kind of worried there's a fans group turned up to kind of have a word with us, hooligans, that kind of thing. What should we do? Özcan just went out and kind of had a word with them, had a cigarette, kind of chatted to them, said, look, I share your pain. We're going to try and win it, and just had an open dialogue with them, if that makes sense. And kind of, he's brought that togetherness and that he's brought that understanding. He didn't shut them out or he didn't ignore them or, call the police type thing. He just has that way about him of he's not afraid of anyone, if that makes sense. I think he's built a solid squad, and I think that showed in the game against AIK. They had a good balance about them. I like the look of Fredrik Ulvestad in midfield. He's come from Burnley, and I think he's going to be a smart signing. 25 defensive midfielder, and he has a lot of balance to their team, in my opinion. Maybe they're slightly light in terms of numbers. Obviously, Kim Kallström's retirement and Magnus Eriksson going as well is a big blow. But to be honest, I think they are dark horses for the title.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they certainly didn't lack for a goal last season, Djurgården. Compared to the other challengers, They were significantly higher scorers than the likes of AIK, for example. But you do make a good point. They've lost players like Eriksson, Engvall, and it's a question of can they replace them properly and whether new signings can settle down, I guess.
Very much so, Steve. I actually think, again, I'm maybe being a bit of a contrarian on this one, but I don't think the loss of Kim Kallstrom will affect them massively. I think it will affect them in the dressing room sense. He's obviously had a fantastic career as a legendary figure in Sweden. But I happen to think that personally he tended to slow down their play a fair amount in his season last season. Obviously being 35. And the thing was, everything went through him. He was the kind of Pirlo type figure. He'd spraying passes around, and so everything literally went through him. But he's lost a fair bit of pace. Obviously in his aging years, he's retired now. And when you're playing that kind of 4-4-2 system that they tend to play, the banks of four, and you've got one midfielder in there, kind of not, really that mobile. It did, I think, affect them in certain games at times. Ulverstad, I think, can replace him. I think they've also got the youngster Hampus Findell, Jonathan Rings come in as well. Dennis Kosika, who's come from Jönköping, he can kind of play central midfield if required, although he may well play on the wing or up front more. But I think Magnus Eriksson is a big loss. Obviously, Skytteligan, top scorer in the league last season, joint top. But no, I'm not down on Djurgården at all. I have to be honest. I think that win against AIK showed a lot of people that they could well be up there this season. It's just about getting that consistency and maybe maintaining that balance. And obviously, the signing of Juraj Movsisian recently up front was the striker they wanted to get in. So, who knows?
Yeah, I've seen a bit of Movsisian in the last 2 years in MLS for Real Salt Lake, and my problem with him, I looked at some expected goal statistics just last night, and he tends to not score as many than he should do in the last couple of years. I don't think he's clinical enough, but he does have a good record in Russia, for example, Spartak Moscow and Krasnodar. So maybe a return to Europe might suit him. He's got potential. So
the thing is with Djurgården, they've got an 11-point deficit to make up on Malmö last season. I think it will be tough to close an 11-point gap on Malmö, but I do think they'll go slightly closer this season. I can see them closing that gap. Whether they can overcome it and win the league, probably not. But I think they're maybe at least third, maybe, and could be top two, definitely.
Yeah, you've got them down as third place. The big question for fans: do you think they're going to finish ahead of big rivals AIK? Now, AIK are the second favourites with the bookies to win this league. But you think that might be a little bit of an overrated element at the moment?
It's going to be an interesting one. To be honest, I went into the game, the Cup semi-final, thinking that they were going to win that game. But what I saw in that game kind of surprised me. And I think what the challenge for Rickard Norling will be is to blend a lot of new players into that squad and kind of regenerate them slightly. I was at we reported on the podcast last season from the Häcken AIK game, which AIK won 6-1. So I'm massively up on AIK. I think some of their football last season was outstanding in the second half of the season. It was funny, they barely could score a goal for the first 6 months of the season, and then first half of the season, sorry. But then the second half of the season, the transfers came in, the likes of Rasmus Lindqvist, the likes of Nicolas Stefanelli, who I think is going to have a really good season again, just reinvigorated them. And they've gone about it again. They've brought in Tarek El Yunusi, who's a 30-year-old who many have tipped to potentially be one of the key men this season in the league, one player to watch out for. Although personally, I didn't think he did a huge amount in that semi-final. They've got the likes of Nabil Bahoui as well as a technical player. But my key man for them, to be honest, is in the midfield there, and I think he was massively missed in that Cup semi-final. It's Enoch Kofi Adu, returning from a spell outside the Allsvenskan for the last year or so. He was at Malmö in the season in 2016 when they won the title, and I really liked him. I saw him live a couple of times. I wasn't surprised when he left, basically, but he's back now. AIK have picked him up, 27, central midfield player. He'll break things up. He'll be the sort of talisman in that midfield. I think he's a massive signing for them.
Yeah, I mean, looking at AIK's big problem last year was a slight lack of goals, just 47 in total. And quite a lot of those came in the second half of the season, particularly the last third. Are they going to have enough threat up front, do you think, to potentially title challenge?
Up front, a lot will depend on El Yunusi. Henrik Goitom's getting on a bit now, obviously 32. They've also got Stefan Silva, who's come in as well. He's signed. But Stefanelli's my man. I think he's a really talented player. I think he could go on and actually make them a lot of money. I think he could be a player who gets sold for a fair amount. So they do have goals in their team, definitely, if they click. But the thing is, I just thought they had a bit of a lack of balance in that Djurgården game. So it will take them time to gel, in my opinion. They got a bloody nose in that game, and I just think that obviously Kofi is the key man in that midfield there. And then obviously the fullbacks, they'll have an important part to play. I like also the signing of Joel Ekstrand, by the way, from Watford. He was previously at Watford as a centre back, so he could shore up could shore them up a bit as well.
I think the general media prediction for AIK is around second place. By the way, you think that might be a little bit too high, but it's interesting to note that they are the general second favourites. So let's see how they go. The third favourites to win the league are Östersunds, a team we've talked quite a lot about on our podcasts over the last year or so. I've even seen some predictions they could actually win the league this time under Graham Potter. Do you think they've got it in them to take down the champions?
Well, I dare say to start with, I think they will finish above AIK. If I'm going to stick my neck out on the line for anything, then I would predict them to finish above AIK, for one. The interesting thing with Östersunds now is they are indeed many people's tip for the title, including Poya Asbaghi, who's the AFK Göteborg manager, who's come out publicly and said he expects them to win the league. So that's an interesting one. It's going to be the first time in Östersunds history, really, under Graham Potter, where they're going to have to deal with something completely new to them. And that is, it's completely new to the club, really, in their history, really. And that is the weight of expectation. They've obviously had internal expectations, from their chairman, who's very ambitious. Obviously, Potter himself as well is extremely ambitious. But this is the first time they'll have pressure coming in from external sources. People are expecting them to win the league. That's the bottom line. And a lot of, like you said, journalists have predicted them and people have predicted them to win the title. Can they do it? Well, the first thing in their favour is obviously the fact that they got knocked out by Malmö in the cup. So that means they're not going to be in Europe this season, so no Europa League. So the Europa League obviously was a massive adventure for them, culminating in the Arsenal game. But also at the same time, could you argue that maybe it was a bit of a hindrance, maybe a distraction? There's none of that now this season, so they can go full guns on the league. And on their day, they are a sensational team to watch, and I think they will blow away a few teams. So that's one thing in their favour. Can they win the title? Well, that's the key question, isn't it, really? That's probably the big question this season.
They're probably going to need Malmö to drop a little bit, aren't they, for that to happen? And obviously they themselves need to be at least on the 60-point mark, probably between 60 and 65 might win it. So it's going to be, I've just looked at their transitions over the winter. They've not really lost too many major players. Somi to the Revolution in MLS is one of the examples. But by and large, they've managed to retain all of their big players, haven't they, John? That's a massive plus.
They've retained a lot of players, but they have lost a few key ones, and Fuad Bacharu is a key one. I think losing him to Malmö kind of that was a bit of a statement of sort of a state stamping their authority on the league. Really, Malmö, they're just sort of saying, listen, we're still the big guns of this league, because Bacharu is a key man for them. The one of the things with Matt Östersunds is going to be, can they keep their players in the summer? Ken Sema is going to be highly coveted now. He was sensational against Arsenal, I thought, at times. Really showed his worth, and I think people will look at him in the summer to sign him. The same with Saman Ghoddos, who many have tipped for maybe top scorer. I had him as an outsider for top scorer last season, but he didn't come in. This season, he will be expected to score a lot of goals. Will he stay in the summer? That's the big question. The good thing for them is Graham Potter's signed a new contract now. He's committed his long-term future to the club. That means that the players will be wanting to stay as well. They'll want to win the title for him. So it will take big offers for them to leave. They will want to stick around, in my opinion. But, like I say, it's the weight of expectation. They've never really had to deal with that before.
Is Graham Potter the best manager in the Allsvenskan?
In my opinion, yes. I think if you look at his record, you only have to look at they beat Arsenal away at the end of the day. That's which other Swedish team could beat Arsenal away? I'm not sure.
There's a lot of people who believe he could actually manage in the Premier League right now, and that's just how good he is. So I think that's a massive weapon they've obviously got as well with him at the helm. So
yeah, and Ian Birchnell said it on the podcast, the last podcast in our interview with him exclusively, said that he thinks he'll 100% manage the Premier League or has the ability to. If you gave Potter Malmö's squad, they'd probably win the league by unbeaten potentially. You know, you could argue if he had the kind of resources to be able to do that. He's built this entire squad from ground up with really no money. I just want to mention Tesfaldet Teki, who I think will be one to watch this season in midfield as well. I think that's a smart pickup. He's a player who's young, and he impressed me at the Emirates actually. Again, signed him from Norrköping for 1.4 million, but he never really played for them, and now he's there on loan. I think that's another good signing. But yeah, to answer your question, I do think he is pretty much the best manager in the league. Yeah.
Going to be really interesting how close they can go to this title. I mean, I really hope from a neutral's point of view, it's a close race up there. We're going to mention one more team potentially in this title battle.
The only thing I'd say, sorry, just before we move on, is if I had to sort of stick my neck out, I would say that I think Malmö's experience puts them in a better position to win the title. So I would probably predict Malmö really.
But closer this year.
Yeah, but a lot closer, and I think Ostersunds do have the ability to do it. But it's just when you get to that key stage of the season, can they actually pull out the results when people are expecting them to win? They've got a lot smaller fan base for one. Malmö have got a huge fan base. You know, they've been there and done it. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? It's the sort of Juventus versus a kind of a Napoli type thing.
I think the really big time is going to be in the summer when Malmö are going to be in Europe, and if they do go on an extended run, I don't care how big your squad is or anything, it just takes a lot out of you. And they've been lucky that they've been so far clear in recent years. But if it is close, the pressure is applied from those teams around, then, you know, it might just be one of them years where they do come unstuck and Ostersunds decide to take advantage. Let's see. Let's talk about BK Häcken, who have lost their manager, Mikael Stara, to San Jose Earthquakes. Had a very good defensive record under Stara last season. They're in the Europa League this time. They've got a new manager. I mean, I don't think you would see them as a title challenger, John, but they're going to be in the mixer to qualify for Europe again.
Well, a lot of people have them to do really well, actually. The bookmakers predict them in fifth, which, you know, last season they were fourth, obviously. I wouldn't say I'm down on them, but I think their challenge this year will be, can they finish above EFK Göteborg, which is always, you know, can they be Gothenburg's kings again? I don't think they should be really looking much beyond that. I can't see them challenging for the title, no way, in my opinion. Not with a new manager, kind of. I think he had a disappointing spell in Denmark last season. Andreas Alm finished 9th before leaving. Did reasonably well at ARK, had I think a 50% roughly win record. But I just think, you know, that new manager thing will have an effect on them. They've lost some fairly good players, in my opinion. Farner on his day was a quality player. He is aging. Abu Bakari's left as well. He was obviously getting on a bit. Exxon Biniku's gone, which was a really good left back to Malmo. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure their squad, the players that they've brought in, will push them towards a title challenge. If I'm honest, they've got Victor Lundberg, who's averages sort of 1 goal every 4 games in his career. Marvin Selick could be a good signing. He's played in Serie A and he's played over 80 games in the Allsvenskan. He has a bag of experience, but title challenger, not for me. No, not really.
Yeah, the general media have predicted them about 5th place, and you think that is probably about right, yeah?
No, I think they're going to be. I think top 6 will be. I don't think they're going to hit the heights of last season. I thought they were really good last season. Mickey Stara, I think, was a good manager actually, and I think although at times he was a bit conservative, I do think he had a good balance of, you know, attack versus defense, and I think he got a good blend. I think they're just going to. I think their top players, their key men, are just aging slightly. Paulinho's 31 now. Can he still do it? They've obviously got players from their academy like Daliho Irandust and Lucas Hedlund is one to watch. Teenagers coming from their academy who will replenish them, but I'm not sure. You know.
Yeah.
Obviously, they've got Alexander Angelin. They've signed him to replace Biniku. Ostensibly, he's a left back. He's never even played in the Superettan, let alone the Allsvenskan. Signed from Utsikten's BK in the 3rd division. I'm just not sure their recruitment versus players they've lost is going to push them massively forward.
Yeah. Okay, let's just move on then to some players to watch this season that you've got a list here of 10 to watch, John, and 6 of them are from the teams we've just talked about. So I'm just going to go through that list now. Matthias Svanberg from Malmö, Fredrik Ulvestad from Djurgården, Tino Kadewere from Djurgården, Enoch Kofi Adu from AIK, and Frank Arin from Ostersunds. Now, obviously, you've talked a bit about some of those players already, but now we can go into a little bit more depth. Let's start with Kadewere, is it, from Djurgården?
Well, he scored against, he helped lift the ghost, he lifted the curse. And could it be a big season for him? I mean, to be honest, I penciled him in as one to watch this season, as one of the key men to watch, or players to watch. This isn't necessarily players who are going to be key, but I think they're players whose value will increase and they will be talked about maybe quite a lot this season compared to maybe their status now, if that makes sense. Maybe might attract other clubs. Kadewere, the problem for him obviously is the fact they've gone and bought Yura Movsisian now. Will he actually get games? But he's a 22-year-old. I do like him. I think he's got a bit about him. Last season, I remember I watched him live and I thought he looked decent. I think he came off the bench in one game and just showed a few glimpses. Took his goal really well in the cup semi-final. I think he's an African player of African descent. I think he's got a bit about him, to be honest. He's got a bit of character as well. He was going crazy after they beat AIK, and I think he kind of really gets it, if that makes sense. I think he gets the fans. I think he loves the club. He enjoys being there, and I think the fans will like him as well. So yeah, one to watch for sure.
And I mentioned about Malmö earlier that they're going to have to replace guys who scored goals and provided quite a few assists for them. Youngster here, Matthias Svanberg, on the wings, one to really keep an eye out for.
Definitely, he started quite a few games in pre-season with Magnus Wolf going. He could be a player who kind of gets the faith of the manager. Like I said, he's very highly rated in Sweden. Even last season, there was a lot of talk about him in Sweden, just from the youth teams and that kind of thing. He can play defensive midfield, central midfield, or right midfield. Yeah, like I say, in certain games, he's been thrown in by Magnus Persson, and that obviously bodes well for him. So I do think he is one to watch for sure. A talented player, definitely. He played he started the game against Östersunds in the semi-final. In the central midfield there, did well. So I think he's one to watch. Definitely, he's an exciting player.
A bit of a sort of a wild card pick here for one to watch in the Östersund squad. Frank Arin, midfielder. So tell us a bit more about this player, John.
Well, this is a new signing. He came in from the Right to Dream Academy in Ghana, who've done fantastic work, by the way, and they're really social project. Obviously, they own a Danish team. So it's a really fantastic academy, and the things they've done, they really implement character into their players as well, and kind of social responsibility. I think a few of their players contributed to that One Matter Foundation, giving 1% of their wages to charitable causes. Excuse me. So yeah, he's come from that academy, gone to Östersunds. Graham Potter can spot a player as well, and the scouting team there as well are very astute when they sign players. He's scored already in the Allsvenskan. I think he's played 2 games, 1 goal, I think, last season. He also looked fairly good in the Europa League. He had a few glimpses in the Europa League, and kind of I like the look of him. I think he'll be a player whose value will increase, and he should get some minutes this season. And
I mean, we talked about these two before: Fredrik Ulvestad and Enoch Kofi Adu for Djurgården and AIK, respectively. Who's the more important to their side, would you say?
Well, it's difficult to say. That's a difficult question to answer. Ulvestad, obviously, has got Premier League experience. He's been at Burnley. Kofi Adu has got Allsvenskan, a massive amount of Allsvenskan kind of quality. He's won titles, that kind of thing. So I think they'll both be important. I've mentioned it already in the previous. I think they'll both be very important.
Crucial players that are going to be.
The dude's won the title twice already in his career. Ulvestad, like I say, he's got experience. He will blend in with a team, and I just thought he gave a real balance to the squad, which they need with obviously Kallstrom leaving.
Okay, one other player to talk about in this list, Daleo Irandus. I think he was mentioned a few times on the podcast last season for Häcken. That he's going to be. You think he's going to have a really big season, don't you?
Yeah, I think he'll be one of the breakout players for sure. This year with Farnerud going, I think Irandus will get more opportunities now. Last season, he already showed glimpses of what he can do. A very exciting talent. For those who obviously don't know, and we had him as a talent focus. I think one of the podcasts earlier in the season. Last season. He can play in the wing. He can play as a number 10. He can play on left or right kind of thing. He's a technical player. I think a lot of people will look at him in the season. Scouts will look at him. Who knows? He may even get a big move. But yeah, he's a very talented youngster.
Okay, we're going to take a little bit of a break now, but join us afterwards, and we're going to be talking about the mid-table battle and the sides that are going to be battling to stay in the Allsvenskan this season. So we'll see you in a little bit.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. We are in the midst of our Swedish Allsvenskan 2018 season preview edition. We've picked up on the teams who are going to maybe challenge for the title, and we're back for part 2. Before we do that, though, we've just got to mention our Patreon, give it a plug, as we have been doing on the last few episodes. We've had another patron join up with us and has agreed to kind of contribute towards helping us this season and kind of accessing any bonus content that we'll be producing. So you know who you are there. Thank you very much as an avid listener for contributing towards the cause and helping us with our costs, running costs, that kind of thing, and allowing us to bring you more exclusive interviews, bonus content, and that kind of thing. Any support is extremely welcome in that sense. You can check out the Patreon on patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. Both contributors so far have signed up for the Jondal Thomason Award, which means they'll be donating a certain amount per monthly. And yeah, anyone else who wants to get involved, like I say, it's the opportunity for you to unlock extra content, extra bonus content, shout outs on the show, that kind of thing. So check out the Patreon for more information. And yeah, like I say, as the season goes on, the more people involved, the more we're going to bring you in terms of exclusive bonus content and that kind of thing.
Yes, thanks very much for all of your support so far, and we'll send some links out there to check out the Nordic Football Podcast on Patreon. So, okay, moving on into the mid-table battle, and I'm going to start with a big club, IFK Gothenburg, John, a club that you're fairly familiar with, and I was looking at their ins and outs this winter, and it just seems a bit hectic, all sorts going on. A club that always has a lot of big ambitions. Whereabouts are they in the Allsvenskan right now, though? I mean, what is the situation in IFK?
Yes, it's a big year for IFK Göteborg. They have a big challenge to kind of re-establish themselves as the kings of Gothenburg after BK Häcken, their smaller brother, so to speak, finished above them last season. In doing so, they've had a complete regeneration. They've brought in a younger manager, in fact, the youngest in the league, I believe, Poya Asbaghi, who did a fantastic job at Gefle last season in the Superettan, keeping them afloat after they were in dire straits. And they've also regenerated the squad. They've brought the average age down fairly significantly. I do like their transfers, and they will look to rectify what was quite a messy year last year, really, with some renewed focus and a new vision.
Tobias Hysén, who scored 9 goals last year and also provided 7 assists for the club. It seemed like he was a key player still, but he's now 36 years old and he's no spring chicken. So can he still do it despite the aging years, John?
Well, no, I don't think they're going to rely on him massively in that sense for goals. Although he will be a kind of figurehead, I don't think he's going to be expected to kind of lead the team completely. One thing about Poya Asbaghi and what they've done in the pre-season, they've rotated their team a fair amount. They've tried different formations, different setups. Everything looks a bit fresher at the moment. Everything looks a bit more energy, a bit more creativity, and a bit more enthusiasm. I thought they were quite bland, and I think the best word to describe them would have been stale and kind of just plodding along really at times last season. Quite bland and drab to watch. I like what I've seen of them in pre-season. They've got a bit more energy. They've like I said, they've tried different formations, kind of a 3-4-3. Even Diskerud's kind of played in a kind of false 9 or an attacking role at times in pre-season. So Asbaghi's obviously trying to do things differently. He's trying to build a more fluid team. And I think the likes of Elias Amarsson, who I think will be one to watch this season, will be more relied on for goals. And they may well look for a player in the summer, maybe a striker as well, to kind of add more goals as well.
Yeah, the mixed Diskerud, before we move on, it's kind of a bizarre one with him. He was at New York City, and then Man City signed him, and now he's on loan from Manchester City. Bloody ridiculous. And Diskerud, I've got to be honest, I don't rate him that much, but maybe he'll be more at home in the Allsvenskan. So,
well, he's very good at selling hats on his Twitter account. He's always got some sort of, yeah, he's good at selling hats.
Well, obviously they're going to hope that he puts them into the mixer for some sort of battle this year. But what's the highest they can realistically go, do you think?
It'll be interesting to see. I think they're a bit of an unknown one in the sense that they've had a massive regeneration. Obviously, Pontus Dahlberg, the big signing, will be off to Watford in the summer after the World Cup. And we have to mention, obviously, the World Cup is going to have probably an effect on the Allsvenskan, or will it at all? Maybe not. But Dahlberg will be off in the summer to Watford. A big signing there, Premier League signing. They lose their goalkeeper. They've brought in the likes of Andre Kallisir, Carl Startfelt, who's come from Bromma Poikina. He's got some Allsvenskan experience. They've brought in Victor Wernerson. What they're going for, and I think what makes me quite excited with this team is that they've got a lot of younger players this season, and also they've got a bit of a renewed focus on their academy. They had a complete overhaul. Basically, IFK were in crisis last season, and they decided halfway through it all, they sacked the manager and had board meetings. The whole club, fans wanted the board to be sacked, kind of thing. They sat down and they redecided. They started a new vision, really. And part of that vision is to integrate more players from their academy into the first team. And a fantastic example of that was at the weekend just past, and the week before the season began. A 16-year-old by the name of Benjamin Nygren came off the bench and scored the winner against Ogorita in the sort of Gothenburg derby, a friendly. But as a 16-year-old, and he's very highly rated, by the way. He's been at Brighton as well, I think, for a trial. A lot of clubs have looked at him, and he's very talented Swedish youth international. And obviously they've got the likes of August Ellingmark, who's 19. So they're going for like a younger Billy Nordstrom. Obviously he's in his 20s now, but Edvin Dahlqvist. They're trying to sort of go through their academy players a bit more and push more of their academy into the first team. And that, I think, has just renewed the club and given them a bit more confidence and excitement.
8th place, the media are generally predicting them at, but it doesn't sound like, not really, it's hard to predict them.
For me, they'll be higher than 8.
Right, okay. So a team that the media are saying are going to be around 6th are Elfsborg. And I have to say, a team we didn't really mention much last year on the Nordic Football Podcast. Apologies for that, Elfsborg fans. But it seemed like if you wanted to see some goals, then you wanted to watch an Elfsborg match, because 3.7 goals per game were averaged in their fixtures. They scored a massive 53, which was the 3rd highest tally in the league. They conceded a whopping 59, which was the worst defensive record in the whole league, even worse than AFC Eskilstuna. They remind me of a team that I had on one of my Football Manager saves a couple of years ago, John, where I just scored goals for fun but couldn't keep them out at the other end. So is it going to be more of the same, do you think, for Elfsborg this year?
Well, yeah, the key for them, obviously, as you've just mentioned there rightly, is can they sort out that horrible defensive record? They would have gone down if it wasn't for their attack, really. And they had Simon Lundeval and others to thank for that, because they had the top assist provider in the whole division as well. It's an interesting one with Elfsborg because obviously they're 6-time league champions. They're quite a big club, really, obviously in the Boras region, and traditionally they're a big club, but they kind of drifted in since they did win that title. I think back about 4 or 5 years ago now. They've got a new manager now as well, so he'll regenerate things completely. Jimmy Tellin, he was formerly at Jönköping last season. Obviously, they went down, but he's a young coach who's highly rated. He's actually ranked as one of the most sort of upcoming coaches in Sweden, really. Tactically flexible, he likes a high press, so he probably will still look for an attacking kind of impetus as he did with Jönköping. But they were even worse. They didn't have the balance that kind of Elfsborg did. Even though they conceded less goals, they weren't very good going forward. But I think now he's got the players to maybe input his own style to things, and I think it's a decent move for him, really. And it will be interesting to see how he adapts to a bigger club.
Okay, Norrköping, they were kind of going really well last year, weren't they? First half of the season, but then they kind of rather fell flat on their arse a bit in the second half of the season. Sort of a lot of predictions in that mid-table range, maybe a little bit higher. How do you think they're going to fare?
Well, Norrköping, they've made some decent signings, I think, but they have also lost a lot of talent. And my worry for Norrköping is, do they have a lack of goals in the team? Maybe have they brought in enough players to kind of overcome the drain of a lot of really talented players from the squad? Obviously, they lost in the summer Nicholas Eliasson, who was a class player. He went to Bristol City. They obviously lost Nicholas Barcroft as well, so that was their left mid and their right mid. Then they lost Sebastian Andersson, who went to Kaiserslautern for a decent fee. Been rumours about Kalle Homburg, but he will stay. He was the top joint goal scorer in the league last season as well. But yeah, my worry for them is just, do they have enough goals in the team? They may go 4-3-4-3 this season rather than a kind of more traditional 4-4-2 that they had. Jens Gustafsson, but I wonder, just, do they have enough? Have they just lost a bit too much quality over the last year to kind of, are they a bit of a Southampton in that sense, where just they constantly lose good players and then it drags them down? That's my worry for them, I would say.
How about some new signings then for Norrköping that could potentially go well this year?
Yeah, well, the one to look out for, in my opinion, is obviously the returning Jordan Larsson. He's come back to Sweden now after a year in the Eredivisie in Holland. He's famously the son of Henrik Larsson. He's a spitting image of him, obviously. 20-year-old. He had a bit of a rough time of it in 2016 with Helsingborg, who got relegated. And famously in the relegation playoff, he was actually attacked by his own fans who ran onto the pitch and tried to rip off his shirt, which was a terrible end to his time in Sweden at that time for a teenager. It was a really harrowing experience, to be honest. And I remember watching that game live, sorry, not live, but on TV, and it wasn't a pleasant thing to watch, really. These masked fans ran onto the pitch, and it was actually quite dangerous. So yeah, he went off to to NEC Nijmegen, but he didn't really have a good time of it. It was signed for about 450,000 euros now, which Norrköping got from the Anderson sale. And yeah, he got 18 goals, 12 assists in 75 games. So as a 20-year-old, yeah, he's the one who will probably come in and look to score the goals to replace the likes of Anderson.
Interesting one. So let's move to another fairly big club in the sort of mid-table vicinity, and that is Hammarby. Far too often in the shadow of their Stockholm rivals AIK and Djurgården. But I just look at them last season, and they seem the definition of a sort of mediocre mid-table side. They won 9, drew 11, lost 10, scored 42 goals, conceded 43. And I've had a look at Hammarby, and I'm just not sure an awful lot's going to change, John. Do you think they can move up, or could they potentially move down the table?
Well, I have to say with Hammarby, to sum it all up, really, they've got a great kit. They've got a great stadium. They've got great fans, but I'm not too enthusiastic about their squad, if I'm honest. I just think their recruitment's been quite random. I think it's just a bit kind of, I look at their squad and I don't really know where they're going with it. The summer in the sort of window mid-season, they brought in a lot of players and kind of just regenerated things. Didn't really work. Bringing in players from different areas. Miro Martankovic, obviously, who used to play for Fulham, famously appeared in that 2-2 draw under David Moyes in the Premier League, where David Moyes, I think, had 81 crosses in one game or whatever it was. He's a Hammarby. Just loads of different random kind of players, and I don't really see. All right, it could all fall into place and it could all go well, but they've even bought a player called Rooney, and it's not Wayne Rooney. It's an 18-year-old from Ghana who's signed from Inter Allies in Ghana. He's a midfielder whose name's Rooney, but I don't know if he plays like Rooney.
Well, let's hope for their sake he does.
Yeah, well, hopefully he does. I doubt I'd be surprised. I doubt it. I mean, he'd have to score a hat-trick in his first game for one. But yeah, the thing with Hammarby is, you've got a bit of a soft spot for them, haven't you, Steve? I've seen you sort of.
I like them. I think they've got great fans. I like their kit, like you said, and there's something about them that I quite like. So they might become my adopted Swedish sort of club, really. And I'm hoping that you can maybe do them as a team in focus fairly early on this season in one of our podcasts. So it will be interesting there. So mid-table, do you think they'll be solid in mid-table? What have they got? Have they got any new players that can make a difference?
Well, a lot of the journalists predicted them to be, what was it, 9th, I think, sort of bang in mid-table, as you said. They've got Jiloan Hamad, who is decent. They do have some decent players. Kennedy Baxter-Soglu, who's a Football Manager legend or Chapman legend. He's 37 now. I do like some of their players. Leo Bengtsson, I think, is a good young talent. but I'm just not really sure where they're going. Nikola Jurgic is an experienced striker. He's played in the Champions League for Malmö, also played 30 games in the Bundesliga. So he's a player who could do well up front, but he's 32. Erkan Zengin is one that everybody's getting excited about. He's been in Turkey and he's come back now, 21 caps for Sweden. But I don't know, they've got Neto Borgs who's come in. They've got a lad who I asked around and nobody really knew who he is, to be honest. And I was trying to work out where he sort of been scouted from. And some contacts I know in Brazil didn't have a clue who he is. So, yeah, it's just I can't figure out some of their recruitment, if I'm honest. So we'll see.
Okay, so a couple of teams the media think are going to be lodged in mid-table this year are Örebro and Kalmar. But there were both of these teams last season kind of were in relegation trouble at one point. Do you think they are in danger again, or are they going to have a fairly comfortable year beating the drop?
Yeah, Örebro and Kalmar, I think that it'll be challenging for both of them. Let's start with Kalmar. For me, it's similar in a way to Hammarby. Their squad list reads more like the Yellow Pages of Sweden, to be honest. You've got it's actually quite funny, to be honest. It made me laugh. They've got two elms. One of them is also retired, so they have 3 elms. They've got 2 ram horns. They've got 3 Hellborgs, or Hallborgers as well. They've got 2 Hellborgs and a Hallborg. They've got a player called Nixon, who he's potentially named after the former US president, obviously. The squad list is quite funny in some ways, really. They've leaned a lot on Brazilian players in the past, and they've done so again in this window. They've got a player called Hayago, who I've never heard of. He's had a nomadic career. Nixon again, he's on loan from Flamengo, where his record's mediocre at best. But then they've got some players who they brought in. They've got Sebastian Ramhorn, as I said, and Johan Ramhorn. I think they're twin brothers, in fact. Gabenga Arioko's come in, who's been in MLS, played 50 games in the Allsvenskan, so he could be a good reinforcement at the back. I think the challenge for Kalmar will be, can they avoid relegation? I don't see them being sort of solid mid-table, if I'm honest. I think they're going to be challenging to just stay in the division. I think that's their main priority, really, from my point of view, looking at the squad. Yeah,
it certainly sounds like everyone is kind of related to each other in the Kalmar team. It kind of reminds me of that Norwich City chant, mate. You know which one I mean, don't you? Örebro, how are they going to do you think?
Well, Örebro, I mean, just before I move on to them, with Kalmar, we're probably being a bit down in some ways. They do have some talent. I do think Pap Due is a decent player. Rasmus Elm, obviously, Romario, and obviously Nana Bergstrand, who came in and pretty much kept them up. So he's an experienced coach, and it should go well. But I just do worry a bit about their squad quality, if I'm honest, based on how they did last year. Can they keep that momentum going? Örebro, I think they're slightly more interesting. A lot of people are down on them, aren't they? Some bookmakers have picked them to go down, I think.
I think the general media, though, are sort of predicting they're going to be mid-table. So there's a few contrasting predictions, really.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of predictions that say they might go down, in fact. But yeah, some are mid-table, some say to go down. I think with Örebro, they've lost players. But I think there may be replaceable ones, to be honest. I think 10th is maybe a bit optimistic. Obviously, they've lost their club legend in Patrick Haginga, who's retired. And then they've lost a few other players as well. Ayaz, Mike Semmer, Divine Nar obviously went in the summer. But I think those players are kind of replaceable, to be honest. I like the signing of Daniel Bjornqvist, who's come from AFC Eskilstuna. I thought when I watched him, he at times looked like their best defender, really. He's a right back, can play left back too. Albin Granlund comes in. He's played 200 plus games in Finland, and he's won a league title. I don't know too much about him, but he's obviously got some experience there. But really, the key for Örebro is the big question: can they keep Nahir Besara? He is, if you were having kind of ratings of a player, he'll be, his value would be sort of maybe triple the others in some ways. He really is a star man for them. And the big question is, essentially, if they keep him, they'll be fine. If they don't keep him, they could well go down. He's that good.
Yeah, he's obviously a big player for them, Nahir Besara. So let's now move into teams that have been predicted to struggle this year. And there's a general consensus that Sirius are going to have a bit of a down year after doing quite well last season overall. I've seen quite a few worrying predictions about this team. But I mean, do you think the concern is genuine, or are they going to surprise a few people?
Well, the thing was serious last year is, I mean, at one point in the season, they were second or third, I believe. They were in the top three. They came out of the blocks flying, and they were really, really exciting. Obviously, that Kingsley Starfo, who now has become a bit of a tragic case, really, with his off-field antics, which we won't delve too much into. Obviously, a legal battle there. He was the kind of talisman of that team, really, and they flew up the league and were doing really, really well. They fell away a bit, and obviously it was hard for them to maintain that form, and they ended up seventh. But seventh is still, I think, their best ever finish in the history. At least it was a really, really good season for them, all things considered. They have to be praised for that, and I think Kim Bergstrand deserved a huge amount of credit for what he did there. It's going to be difficult for them this season. I think their squad's slightly too big. That's one worry for me. Does he know his first team, and how are the players who don't start maybe going to deal with that? But yeah, I think some people have said they may well go down. I'm not sure about that. I think he's a good manager, Kim Bergstrand, actually.
Enough quality, do you think? What about, is there a couple of players that are going to be really important to them?
Well, the key man to mention in that sense is Omar Adari, who I'm stunned that they managed to get him from AFC Eskilstuna. He had been linked with Fulham at one point and teamed in the Championship. From what I understand, he found it hard to actually get a move. I don't really know why, to be honest. But yeah, he ended up at Sirius, which is a really good signing for them. Maybe a worrying thing is that they've probably brought a few too many players from AFC Eskilstuna, because they've got Abdul Razak as well, who EF Göteborg couldn't wait to get rid of. They've also got in Albanoz. So they've got a lot of players who've kind of gone down, which can always be worrying, can't it, sometimes? But no, I think they've got a good manager. I think a lot of their players have got a good upside potential, but the challenge is, can they, they've got points to prove, really. And I was surprised they loaned out Zacharias Fowler, who's gone to Osters on loan in the second division. He's formerly of Man City. But ultimately, Shkodran Maholi and Moses Ogbu are two players who will carry that team in the forward lines. Ogbu's a really good player.
And ultimately, you think they're going to survive?
What was, I think the media prediction was 12th?
Yes.
I don't think they'll go down, but I do think a lot will depend on players who have some question marks over them. Can Adari repeat his form of that season? Albanoz, what can he offer? What can Razak do? Razak's got a lot to prove, really, this season. 12th is probably about right, I'd say. Maybe 10th, I'd say. I think they'll be higher than 12th, but they need to get a good start.
Now, last season, Sundsvall won on the last game of the year. They won 3-0 in Göteborg to secure themselves a place in the Allsvenskan for this year. But I've seen a lot of people predict them to finish bottom of this league, GIF Sundsvall. And there's definitely going to be some big worries about them this season, isn't there?
Yeah, well, in terms of their squad, they've it's almost been like a bit of a tsunami this summer. They've lost their entire midfield in terms of their first choice starting midfield. They've lost most of their defence, so it's going to be a real challenge for Joel Siduin to keep them up. You do have to worry for them, really, in that sense. I mean, they've lost Dan Dawson, Claude Gerson, they've lost Sulic, who's gone to Östersund, they've lost Sigurdsson, and they've all gone to good clubs as well. They've all found a club probably in the Allsvenskan. Sonko Sundberg went to obviously Östersund. Danielson's gone to Djurgården. Erik Larsson's gone to Malmö. So these are players who are getting good contracts elsewhere. And in terms of their replacements, they've looked at kind of the Spanish market, and you just wonder if these players. I mean, I think David Batanero did really well for them in the summer, second half of last season. And I think maybe the thinking's just been, let's just pick up a few more Spanish players and see how things go. I mean, Samu Dolas Reyes, he last played 90 minutes for them on January the 4th, 2017. So he's not even been in the squad in the second division of Spain for over a year. And he's meant to be ostensibly their one of their main left backs now. You do worry for them.
I think it's going to be a struggling season for GIF Sundsvall. Let's move on to the three newly promoted teams. BP, Dalkurd and Trelleborg. Let's start with the reigning Superettan champions, BP. I'm not even going to try and pronounce this name. John, you're the man for that. But how do you think they are going to go?
Ruben Poikane, yes, they've had a big squad overhaul. Came up last season. They've got a great academy. They're a team I quite like, actually, Stockholm-based. Like I say, obviously, they put a huge emphasis on their academy, but they've had a lot of turmoil in terms of off field. They've lost their manager, Olaf Melberg, who is a bit of a Aston Villa. Fans might remember him from Aston Villa. Obviously, he left. He was linked to go to EF Core actually at one point, and he's gone now. They've brought in a younger coach, Luis Pimenta, who's a Portuguese coach. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. I think he was in Norway actually with a team in Norway. I think in the Obos League.
Kongsvinger.
I don't know if you know much about him yourself.
No, I'm not. I don't really follow that league too much, so don't really know much, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, they've had a big sort of squad overhaul in that sense, and it'll be interesting to see how they get on.
Do you think? I mean, I just noticed myself that they lost the likes of Kevin Cabran and a big scorer from last season, Victor Gyökeres. And I mean, are they replaceable? Do you think, or is it going to be goal scoring is going to be a problem?
Well, Victor Gyökeres has gone. I don't know if my pronunciation is right there, but Victor Gyökeres has gone to Brighton, so replacing him is going to be tough because obviously they've thought he's Premier League quality, and he is a good player. He bagged 13 goals. They've got Gustafsson. They've managed to keep Marcus Gustafsson. He got 10 assists, which is a key player, obviously, so he'll be heavily relied upon. I think their midfield looks quite weak to me, if I'm honest. They've got Gustav Sandberg Magnusson, who's a captain and a stalwart for them, but I just wonder about some of the players. I mean, they've got Alexander Nielsen who comes from Sirius. I wasn't really massively high on him. The games I saw of him, I just wonder if they have enough in that midfield and also defence. I think Badran Majeti will be a decent signing. Maybe he got 12 and 12 for Gefle in the Superettan last season after joining mid-season from Lillestrøm. But yeah, the main priority for them is can they stay up. That's the bottom line, really.
They had a 12-1-2 home record last season. A superb home record there. So they're going to need the same again this year. And the team that finished second last year in the Superettan was Dalkurd, another very strong home record, winning 10 times in front of their own fans. Now, I was interested to see one of my old associates, Sam Hart, post his prediction for the Allsvenskan this season on Twitter earlier, and he thinks Dalkurd are going to finish as high as 11th. By the way, Sam, hope you're doing well if you're listening to this podcast, mate. Always great to see you on Twitter with these sort of predictions. But yes, 11th place, and I've seen a couple of other sort of suggestions that this team could be a pleasant surprise, Dalkurd.
Well, firstly, I think you need to sort of you and Sam maybe need to get a room together and take your personal matters elsewhere. But no, hello to Sam and hope he's doing well. I think Dalkurd, in a way, they look like kind of maybe the AFC Eskilstuna of this season, really, in a sense. They've got a very kind of sort of multicultural mixed squad and, a good blend, really, of players. They've also brought in players like Mohamed Bouyatori, I think, is a big signing for them. I'm surprised he's gone there again as well because he was linked to moves to Ligue 1, in fact. And he's ended up at Dalkurd after a bit of a fallout with his club. But, yeah, they've got Fahad Ayaz, who was pretty average at Örebro last season. 4 goals, 1 assist. But no, they're going to be an interesting one, I think. They'll be an exciting team to watch. Obviously, they're only formed in, they're a bit like Östersund in a way. They're only formed in 2004 as a sort of a social club for the Kurdish community. So they're going to have a massive support from the Kurdish community, not just in Sweden, but around the world, as they already do. They've got some ownership issues off the field. Some cynical fans are kind of talk about the 50+1 rule and if it's being bypassed in any way. And obviously they've had quite a lot of investment, really, to be honest, for a small club. Won several promotions and find themselves in the Allsvenskan. But I think they'll be an exciting team to watch, both on and off the pitch. I think they'll make headlines for good and bad reasons, in my opinion. I think there'll be some controversies along the way. But they'll be one to watch for sure, and I think they'll be quite interesting to keep an eye on, really.
The third promoted team are Trelleborg. They beat Jönköping in the playoff last season. Again, there's not, in a similar way to GIF Sundsvall, there's not too many people giving them much of a chance this season, Trelleborg. But, I mean, what do you think they've got a chance of surviving automatic relegation, John? Or could they maybe nick into that sort of third bottom spot? Do you give them a prayer? Well,
Trelleborg, it's interesting because on your Norwegian season preview, we talked about Ranheim, didn't we? And Trelleborg are essentially the Ranheim of Sweden. It's a very similar situation. Ranheim, obviously, with Rosenborg in the area and kind of taking a lot of their players, the equivalent to Trelleborg is Malmö. Trelleborg are based in Skåne, which is obviously quite near Malmö. Half their squad either played for Malmö or has come on loan or is ex-Malmö youth players, that kind of thing. And it's a similar situation. They've got a bit of a link up and they've used that to kind of go up. Trelleborg have the youngest squad in the Allsvenskan, so that'll be interesting to look out for. Everyone's pretty much routinely predicted them to be rock bottom. Like I say, they've got a lot of loan players. They're not very experienced, really. A lot of the players are inexperienced. You know, a lot of their bulk of their experience has either been in the Superettan on loan from Malmö or elsewhere, really. So it will be a real challenge for them. I think Dennis Hummet's a good signing. He's come from Gefle. He was one of Superettan's top scorers last year with 12 goals. But yeah, it's just all about enjoying themselves, really, for Trelleborg. Everyone's tipped them to go down.
Which two teams do you think are going to go down automatically, and who's going to finish third bottom?
Well, it's tough to just put my neck on the line like that. But I think Trelleborg will struggle to be outside the bottom two. So I'd have them as one maybe to go down. If we're looking at it today, I'd say I think Gibson's Farm may well end up in the bottom two or bottom three. And I think Bromma Poikina as well, maybe be in that playoffs, maybe one above that. But I think those three will be looking at maybe going down. I think the outside tip maybe is Örebro. I think if Örebro lose Basara in the summer and they don't replace him, I think they could potentially go down. They've got a young manager, Axel Kjærlis, his first full season as a manager. Losing Basara will be a real blow for them if they don't replace him. So they'd be my outsider, really, or Kalmar. But yeah, those three, Trelleborg, Bromma Poikina, and as I've said,
GIF Sundsvall. Okay, so let's talk about some players to watch in these bottom teams. We'll talk about some players to watch from the newly promoted sides in a minute, but let's just go into this guy Basara in detail, John, because you mentioned quite a bit on this podcast. What is so good about him? And it's going to be so important for Örebro.
Yeah, well, the funny thing about Basara is, for one, he recently posted a video on his Instagram of his highlights, and he's out of contract quite soon. So the funny thing that a lot of fans shared it on social media saying, is this a sort of come and get me plea? Because he's been linked to a lot of bigger clubs, and Hammarby are one of the ones who are apparently quite highly tipped to maybe pick him up in the summer, and their fans would really like to get hold of him because he is a really good player. He's versatile, he's technical, can score goals on either foot. Last season, I think he got 7 assists, 10 goals, which is fantastic, really, for a player of that level. I think he will be off either in the summer or at the end of the season, and it's just a case of, you know, who will get him, really. I think he could be the key to the whole season, in my opinion, because I think he will leave in the summer somewhere, and it's just who would pick him up. And then if Örebro did hold on to him, that will help them stay up, if that makes sense. So if he leaves, he could potentially help send them down. If he leaves and goes to one of the challengers, he could decide the title race potentially. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting one to watch, Basara, really, what happens with him. And I think that could hold the key to a few positions in the table and clubs. I
do believe you've got a very young player to keep an eye on for at BP, Jack Lanner.
Yeah. He's actually, I think I'm right in saying this, I may be wrong, but I think he's the youngest goal scorer in Swedish football history. He scored for Bromma Poikina last season as a 15-year-old. And I've seen him live a few times, and I have to say, he's a sensational talent. He's one of the youngest scorers, as I mentioned. He's a winger, and yeah, I remember watching him in a youth tournament in Sweden, and I just thought this kid is unbelievable. And then, like I said, a few weeks later, he was actually making his debut. He's only 16. I don't know if he'll stay there. There's talk about him maybe moving or whatever, that kind of thing, obviously being so young. He's a winger, but I don't know how much game time he'll get. But he is, I really liked what I saw of him in it. And it was interesting that Melbourne gave him those opportunities as a 15-year-old in men's football. But yeah, one to watch.
And a player to keep an eye out for Trelleborg, Noah Kristoffersen. What do you like about him?
Yeah, again, he's not played much, to be fair to him. He's only, I think, played 3 or 4 times in the first team in pre-season. But he's got 19 goals in 20 games for their under-19s. So I think he will be one to watch potentially. But obviously they've got Salif Kamari Jonsson, who is 34 now. But he actually scored 8 goals in 2 games last season. He scored 4 goals in 2 consecutive matches, which is unbelievable, really, last season.
Outrageous.
I know. Yeah, he got 15 goals all season, so he got more than half of that in 2 games. But Christopherson is a bit of a younger one, maybe, and obviously they've got Dennis Hummert, who's an ex-Troyes player in Ligue 2. But Christopherson could be their man to watch. Maybe he might emerge as the season goes on.
Yeah, I remember him at Troyes. He was pretty crap there, really. But times change, don't they? And a player to watch out for at Dalkurd. Who's going to be their big player?
Well, I think Buya Touré is a big coup there. If he can keep his head screwed on, I think he got 3 red cards last season, or at least 2. But if he keeps his head down and works, he's a really good player. He will be a big signing for them. They've also got a player called Yunus Banu Marzouk, who used to play for Juventus, actually. And he's on the season-long loan from Lugano in Switzerland. He's 22 and a striker as well, and he'll be one to watch as well, I think.
There's just a couple of other players on your list to watch this season. One that we're very familiar with on this podcast, Mikkel Ingebrigtsen at IFK, and Maroki Ndione at Elfsborg. What have you got to say about those 2 players?
Well, Ndione is an 18-year-old. He's a striker. He's another one I've seen live in the youth teams, and I think he's really good. Future ahead of him, and he's sort of broken into the first team squad. Talented prospect, and obviously the fact they've lost, they've lost some goals, and the new manager may well push him in there. Ingebrigtsen, you know more about him than me, so maybe you should take it away on him. But there's quite a bit of excitement about him actually in Gothenburg.
I think it was a really good signing. Didn't cost not that much money. I think 170,000 euros in total. Could be a real snip if he develops as I expect him to. And I do agree. I think he certainly deserves to be on this sort of 10 players to watch list, or a players to watch list that you've generated here. So I think that pretty much is the end of the preview. Thank you very much indeed for your brilliant thoughts and analysis on the Swedish Allsvenskan for this season. There'll be plenty more of that in episodes to come throughout the whole campaign. And once again, apologies for any Norwegian listeners, but this week we had to devote all our attention to the Swedish Allsvenskan. The next episode will be much more balanced. Plenty of Norway, plenty of Sweden, and hopefully there'll be some really interesting games to talk about from the upcoming rounds. So once again, thank you very much, John. Brilliant analysis there, and let's hope for a great season in Sweden.
Yes, it's been a great show, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod, and also check out our Facebook page. Just type in Nordic Football Podcast if you haven't deleted your account already due to the privacy issues. But a big game coming up this weekend, Östersund's Djurgårdens. And so from this week on, we're going to be back, aren't we? We're going to be back to normal kind of every week now, Norway and Sweden. Can't wait. Can't wait. It's going to be really great. And big match there on the Sunday to look for. I'm going to try and watch that all myself. But from this edition of the podcast, it's goodbye from me. And take care, everyone. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.